Welcome to The Second Studio, a podcast hosted by the Architecture and Design Office fame. My name is David Lee, and with me is Marina Boer-Deronay. This week it's the two of us, and we are talking about architects as optimists. Are architects optimists? Do you have to be an optimist to be an architect? Can you be a pessimist?
Try to even define other nuances between the two.
No, but you have to choose one or the other. That's the rules. So let us know, if you listen to this, whether or not you identify as an optimist or a pessimist, or if you think that in order to practice architecture, you have to be optimistic.
Yep.
Okay, sponsors.
Designers and architects, if you're looking for a powerful and real-time visualization and VR tool, then check out Enscape. Why is Enscape special? Well, it's super easy to use because it's a plugin and not a standalone application, which means you can work directly in your SketchUp, Rhino, ArchiCAD, Vectorworks, or Revit model. It only takes a couple clicks from installation to creating your first rendering. Enscape does realistic renderings, 360-degree panoramas and videos, and virtual reality environment. We use Enscape and we think you will love it too, so click the Enscape 3D link in our show notes to learn more.
Fellow architects and interior designers, if you're looking for an ultra-fast and robust BIM computer program for your office, then check out ArchiCAD. ArchiCAD leads the industry by enabling architectural and interior design firms around the world to freely design, supported by innovative technology that expands as far as the imagination can stretch. ArchiCAD is also always evolving and advancing, which allows designers to push that technology to their advantage while working in an accurate model. So start your fully functioning free trial today by clicking on the ArchiCAD link in our show notes. This is The Second Studio with the two of us. Here we go. So the topic of being optimistic came around because it's something you hear very often from a lot of architects. Like, many architects will say that to be an architect is to be an optimist. And you have to be optimistic to be an architect. They go hand in hand.
Right.
And I don't know why architects say that.
Well, they say that because it's kind of a mad career in a way, right? Because everything and everybody is going to try and probably most likely going to go against what you're trying to achieve. And you're going to have to rely on so many people and so many things to go right and in the direction that you're selling for it to be successful, that you absolutely have to be an optimistic. Otherwise, what would you even bother? Knowing that from the get-go. Right.
Do you think, though, that being an optimist, I mean, it's not specific to the practice of architecture or to the professionals that are architects. I mean, it sounds to me that by that definition, or from what a lot of architects say, that would also apply to anyone who's creating something.
Yeah,
I mean,
it would, but I think it's because architectural projects are particularly complex. They take a very long time. You know, from everything from design to permitting to construction, right? Like, that's a long process. And there is a lot of people involved that you don't have control over. Mm-hmm. So it's not just like, oh, I'm an artist, I'm doing my painting in my studio and I have to be optimistic. Well, no, you can actually do whatever the fuck you want. Like, it's just you and your brushes and your canvas, right?
Yeah, I guess that's an interesting point, because it kind of implies that in order for there to be optimism, there has to be challenges that you are viewing in a positive way. And enough challenges, enough complexity to whatever is being done. When there's not enough complexity, then I suppose you can still be an optimist. But if you have full control over whatever it is, then it's sort of, I don't know, you can be an optimist about your own work if you have full authorship over it, like a painting. Like, it's an odd thing to say.
And the interesting thing too, if you said like, oh, if you're creative, maybe you have to be optimistic. But the other thing too is that our architectural creations don't come to life until they're built. Right. Which for an artist, like, it's much more immediate of a process, most likely. But if you think of researchers, it's the same thing. Like, I feel like you have to be an optimistic person if you're a researcher, because the thing you're hunting for, I might not find it until like decades of working on it. Yeah. Right. So you just have to keep being excited about the outcome, even if the outcome is very far from today.
Yeah. That's probably a good definition, I think.
Yeah, I know. You're welcome.
So, okay, that's one. One is that architects are optimists because architecture is challenging to produce. Yeah. And therefore, to see it through, you could say it means you have to be an optimist. I think the other reason why architects say that is because we assume that all architects practice and they're trying to create something that will basically improve life for everybody, right? Something that will improve society and be a benefit to society. And therefore, you're an optimist that A, society can change for the better,
right.
and B, it can, the architecture can be a vehicle to catalyze that.
Well, and if you think about it, if you want the outcome, the building, the project to be successful and have a positive impact, you probably have to bring good energy to that project to create it. Right. I mean, it's like, I don't know, if you go to a party and you show up as a complete downer, like super negative, and you're hoping the party is going to be the best party of your life, probably not.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I feel like you kind of, it's not always like you get what you've put in, but most likely if you put good stuff, some good stuff at some point is going to come out of that. Right. So I do feel like if you want the work to be good and have a positive impact, you probably need to bring that energy to the table to create that work.
Okay, so you're thinking more about like energy transfer from the body to the work to the...
Well, not in a spiritual weird way, because I'm not really into these things.
That's what it sounds like you're saying, though.
No, but it's like... No, because it's kind of contagious, right? So if you're a positive person, you're excited about yourself, you talk to your client the same way you're talking to your colleague about the project. You just, like, if you manage to make everybody excited and optimistic and positive about the project, like it's a force in itself, right?
That's true. Okay, so there's that aspect too in terms of having the project work out.
Yeah.
Right. When there's good feelings behind it, you're sort of being the team leader that is spearheading the efforts and creating an atmosphere, a camaraderie, a culture around the project that affects everyone in the project, all the 100 or more people. And that, of course, in turn affects their work, which affects the product. I buy that. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and actually you mentioned team leader, and I think that's also probably a good quality for a team leader to have, being optimistic, because how can you lead anybody to follow you into something if you don't believe it's going to succeed?
Yeah.
Right? Like if you go to war and you're thinking that you're going to lose, well, probably not going to turn out very well, right? And I'm not sure
rally the troops.
And I'm not sure your army would be very big either, because again, I think it goes back to the
We're going
energy.
to battle. Get ready. Okay, you're on the front lines. So, I don't know about this one.
But I think...
I'm not sure it's going to work out.
Yeah, no, and I think leadership and optimism is related, because it is very much... Again, it goes back to the energy thing. Like, it's a powerful feeling,
But I do want to make the distinction. I think, like, believing that whatever you're seeking to do will happen is different from having a positive outlook and energy and way of communicating to people. Like, one can believe it's going to work out, but they can be a dick about it, and they can be very negative in the way that they treat other people.
Yeah.
You know, and I think you're talking about both things.
Yeah, I mean, you could be competitive and not necessarily optimistic.
Right.
Right.
But I was saying that I think being an optimist, in a lot of architects' minds, their first reason for saying that is they believe that they're contributing, again, to society. So they believe that they can have a positive impact.
Yeah.
And again, even before that, they believe that things can change. I mean, I think that when I think of the folks who are optimists, this sounds kind of crazy, I think of politicians, but not the politicians where they're shady and kind of crooked and all that stuff, which is like most of them, but the ones who, let's say, they're good people, they have good objectives, they have a good mission, they wholeheartedly want to have change happen for their community, and they're trying, right? And in my mind, any kind of position where you are dealing with the general public and you're trying to change things for the better, that's really difficult. Like teachers, I think, are optimists, public teachers in particular, like you have to be. There's no other way that you would be able to get up and function, I think.
What's the English word for the opposite of optimistic?
Pessimistic.
I mean, it's interesting to think about. Like, if you think about the people you know, can you tell who's optimistic, who's pessimistic? And therefore, can you kind of tell, like, what's their personality is like? And And did that impact their life in any way, you know?
Yes. I think you can tell. I think the difficult thing is...
It's interesting, too, with pessimistic people, is that I feel like they just keep convincing themselves that things are bad.
And usually in that mindset, it's everyone else's fault.
Yep.
Right? So here's the odd... So to answer your first question, I think you can tell. I think with these types of topics, like whether or not you're an optimist or a pessimist, it's not really proven until a certain period of time has passed. Right? You can't be an optimist for a day or 2 weeks or even a month or even a year and recognize the positive outcomes necessarily. It takes time. So I'm thinking of individuals who have lived, who are older than us, have lived for 50 years, 60 years or whatever. I know some who are very optimistic, or in other words, let's say they're very positive people. And I don't mean they're like Mickey Mouse. I mean, they have bad days for sure, but they, for the most part, see things in a positive light. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, it's like you were saying, I don't have to do it. I get to do it. That kind of mentality for the most part. Then I'm thinking of other people who, man, everything's a problem. Everything is a problem. Everything's out to get them. Everyone's against them. Everyone else is screwing up. Why didn't they do this? Or why didn't they do that? Why did that person do this to me? And it's not that they're always claiming to be the victim. It's more like they just, of all the things that are in reality, they filter out, their lens is that they just, all the bad stuff comes to the surface, and that's what they see first and foremost and more than anything else, right? And that's not necessarily to say that they're a bad person and they can't do good things. It has nothing to do with that. It's just the way that they see things.
Right.
And I would say that if you have that mentality and you have that mentality for many years, like decades, it affects you, of course. I mean, it affects you like emotionally, but I mean, it affects your existence in the world and what you can eat, what you achieve and what you do. Right.
Well, yeah, because again, if optimism is a driver or a motivation toward things, if you don't have that, then where would that come from?
There's an interesting fact I read that the brain is much more creative and open and flexible, and therefore it's better at problem solving when you are in a happy state. When you are in an angry state, you don't see nearly as many options as you could be seeing, which I think is very fascinating because obviously what we do involves getting into that creative flow state.
Yeah.
And I think you have to have a certain energy about you to get there. And I know that in my own work, like when I'm designing something, like in that design is like the purest form of creativity, creative thought, right? I'm not thinking about schedules. I'm not thinking about, emails and how to handle, coordination, how to talk with this consultant or what. I'm just thinking about just the design of this building, right? When I'm in that mode, the times that it goes more smoothly is when I'm in a lighter kind of mindset, and it also kind of feeds itself, right? Because if you find something that you think is a good solution, then you're happy and you keep going.
No, it's interesting.
And then when you find something that's like a terrible solution, you're like, damn it, why can't I figure this out? And then it just kind of spirals and you get into a rut. But anyway.
No, it is interesting. I mean, I experience that, on a weekly basis, where if I'm trying to do something and I've been struggling with it, I just start to be have my negative energy coming out, and it's usually not helping.
We were talking to a group of students not long ago, and one of the students, they were asking us questions, right? And one of the students asked us, what was the question they asked? It was something like, when did you realize that you weren't talented, or that I think talent was the word, but it was something like that, right? Which is the bold question for a student to ask a guest person, but it was everyone knew each other. It was cool. It was fine. And I actually thought that was a really interesting question. And my response to it was, there's many times I've realized that, but one is anytime I'm trying to design something, and it is a way to say that I think the act of designing requires friction and adversity. I personally feel that way. I think that if as a designer, when you're at your desk by yourself, working and sketching and drawing, if you are not coming across adversity, then you're not doing it right. I believe that.
Maybe if you're really good, you don't need adversity.
I don't buy it. I mean, okay, sure. Maybe if you get to the age of like 89 and you're Frank Lloyd Wright and you can just shake houses out of your cuff, then fine. But short of that one individual, I don't think so. I don't buy it for one, because I think if you're actually going to design something that's really good, you will find adversity. Two, I think just as a person, if you are trying to always be better, you will come across friction. You need to find friction in the work itself.
Well, you need to challenge yourself.
You need to challenge yourself, and you need to know that during that challenge and that frustration and the lack of answers and the confusion, you need to trust somewhere deep down that you will figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very weird thing. That's a very weird thing. And that's what it means to be an architect. Like we were talking to Kevin Costello on the show, right? Costello? I think it's Costello because it's Irish or something. Apologies if I fucking that up.
But yeah,
I think it's Costello. But, and I think we were talking with him about, working with new clients and clients always being concerned with, I have this project. Let's say I have this house in this particular site, this particular region, this particular whatever. You have not done a project that has these same 5 factors as mine, right? So how do I know that I can trust you? And any architect listening to this, they know exactly what I'm talking about when clients are concerned with these things. And the reality is that every project any architect does, if they're actually a real architect, I think, is different. So it's not really about, you're not really hiring me for the fact that I've done 5 things identical to what your property is. You're really hiring me because I've done those 5 things and I figured them out. And those clients trusted me to figure those things out, and I did. And by the way, for each of those 5 different projects, they were different, and each of those projects had, it was new. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I solved it. That's actually what you're paying for, right?
Right.
So that ties into this idea, though, that when you're designing, when you're approached with a design problem, you don't have the solution. It's not written yet. There's no formula for it. And I think there's a little bit of being an optimist in that action.
Finding the solution. Well, again, it goes back to the researcher.
Exactly. You hope it's going to work out. You assume it's going to work out.
Now, do you think that optimism maybe is more common in younger people, in younger architects than older architects?
Yes, I think optimism and naivety are closely related, right? We hear it often, and it's the case for us, has been the case for us, that being naive is really like having a superpower because you just go after stuff.
Well, it's like, I don't know, it's like when you go to get surgery the first time, you don't really know what to expect. So it's like the being naive in a way, right?
Okay.
Like it's naive in the sense of ignorant. You don't know what to expect.
Yep.
Therefore, that doesn't stain your thoughts yet, right? Which, I think it's more common for younger folks.
I mean, even kids, but I when wonder they're playing.
Even kids, their
imagination
innocent.
is wild, and their beliefs of what they can achieve is extreme.
But I wonder, like, if you're younger architect and you are optimistic, what do you think you can do to preserve your optimism throughout the years of your career so you don't lose it? Because I feel like a lot of architects maybe started very optimistic and then, working with some difficult clients, shitty offices, projects that don't turn out well, taxes,
insurance,
life, just kind of like brush the optimism away and just left negativity. And I'm wondering if there is anything that could be done to just preserve it and save it.
So I think, one, when you're a younger person, you can't plan for the future. There's nothing you can do. So if I was a 20-year-old, right, there's nothing I can do as a 20-year-old to ensure that I'm going to be optimistic in the future. You're going to have to do it when it's there and when it's time. So I think, having an optimistic mindset. Some people are naturally just that way. Like I knew a person in school where they were always on time. They were always happy. It annoyed the fuck out of me. They brought pancakes to the final review day for everyone in the class.
You mean they got their shit together?
They had their stuff together, and they're just an awesome person. And I think they're just that way. Sometimes folks are like that, but outside of those individuals, it's practice. It's like going to the gym or exercising.
Yeah.
You need to, it takes some amount of effort. And to me, it's the simple, I don't like making things too complex, right? So that's not true. I make things very complex. But in cases like this, I think making it simple is the solution. I can either choose to, again, look at the good things, or I can look at the bad things. I can see things and assume they're going to work out, or I can assume they're not going to work out. I can look at the challenges and say I get to do it instead of I have to do it, or I can complain and say I have to do it. It's very simple. That's all it is. And I think personally, it probably comes from a place from when I was a little kid. Me and my sister growing up like little kids, my parents, we didn't have like a lot of money, but my parents would always say that whatever we're doing, you know, as a family, we go trips or see relatives or go to school or whatever it is. My parents would always say, whatever you're doing, just enjoy yourself. Wherever we're going, doesn't matter. Even if we're visiting Palm Desert and your kids and it's like 110 degrees and you hate it because it's hot, just enjoy yourself. Just enjoy the fact that you're there. And it's kind of a dumb thing. It's a kind of thing that you don't want to hear if you're in a bad mood, obviously. But generally, that's always stuck with me. It's an interesting philosophy. It's not even a philosophy. It's just enjoy yourself, whatever you're doing. There's no reason not to, in a certain sense, right? And it also has to do with control, in my view, right? Outside of 2 inches away from me, I can't control anything beyond those 2 inches. Only within this 2-inch space can I control things. So, and how I feel and how I look at everything is up to me. It actually doesn't matter what's happening out there, right? It's going to be what it's going to be.
Right. Well, sometimes you do worry about things you cannot control. So I don't know if I really buy that fully.
Like what? Give me an example.
I don't know. I feel like sometimes you get upset about things that I'm like, hey, there's nothing you can do about it. So just suck it up and move on.
I know. This is the advice I'm giving to people. This is not what I do for myself.
No, but and enjoy yourself, I think, it's a good mindset to have. It's interesting that that's kind of like what your parents used to tell you as kids. I don't think my parents ever told us that, and I think we also didn't have a lot of money growing up, and I think I was very aware of that, and I was made very aware of that, so it was less, I don't know, it was less directly said, like we kind of knew like when we had to enjoy things because there wasn't many occasions of enjoying them.
Yeah, I don't want to make it sound like this was only said when we're on vacation. I mean, like we... my sister and I, when we were little, like we would make games and fun out of nothing. You know, like people say, "Oh, we play with dirt." We were like,
I played with dirt.
We didn't play.
I play with dirt.
Like literal.
Oh yeah, dirt and leaves and like seeds from like trees and flowers in the backyard. Oh yeah, we would like make shit up out of nothing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, see, there you go.
Your plays, your games were actually way fancier than my sister.
We would throw rocks and see how close we could throw rocks to the other rock. So that is definitely more sophisticated than dirt. We'll say that for sure. But you know, it's kind of silly to talk about childhood memories, but that was kind of how we just existed. And when we were kids, of course, the world is much less complex. It's much easier to be happy and everything's fun and kind of rainbows. But, you know, thinking about it, it was easy. And it was easy because it didn't occur to us that there was another way of looking at stuff.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, oh, the neighbor, hey, he has like the latest Nintendo, the latest this, the latest that. I never really gave a shit, right? Because us playing with string and cardboard was just as probably more fun and more interesting, and throwing rocks next to the other rock to see who could get the rock the closest. I mean, that's like a stupid game, but it wasn't like, oh gosh, we only have rocks to play with. Like, we just didn't care. And it could be because we never experienced the other you know, side of it, so maybe that's why. But
it's interesting because I don't think I knew kids that were pessimistic. Or maybe there was a few, but it's interesting.
Adults are pessimistic.
But it's interesting to put optimism and pessimism with happiness or unhappiness, because I mean, I think they're very closely related.
What was the other thing you were asking about a moment ago? Optimism and...
how to preserve it over time so you don't lose it.
Right.
I mean, I think you're right. I think it's kind of like going to the gym, and I think it's also sometimes just assessing your own reaction to things and be like, hey, is this helping me moving forward or not? Hey, does that make sense? Like, am I just being a downer? Am I being too naive here? Am I being too optimistic? Because I think also being too optimistic could be a danger to yourself.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Do you think architects struggle with being optimists? And here's the contradiction I see, is most architects will claim that they are optimists because they are architects. It's almost like, because I'm an architect, I'm an optimist.
Yeah.
Because I do architecture, I'm an optimist. But
I think there's a lot of people who say that who are not.
A lot of architects who are not. I'd agree. If I think of the general architect I know, I wouldn't characterize them as an optimist. So I do want to say that I don't think that just because you attempt or you create architecture or design architecture that you're an optimist. I don't believe that. I do not believe that. And again, most architects I know, I think they're probably more pessimists than anything else. I don't care if you're creating something. It doesn't make you an optimist. So why would architects be pessimists? Let me ask you that.
Why would they?
Yeah.
Because they're misunderstood.
Okay, keep going.
Because they're underpaid, undervalued, because they're competitive, because they just keep repeating the same stuff over and over in their work, because they're not talented.
Okay.
I mean, that's a bad reason to be.
And they're ugly. Right, okay.
And they're ugly and they're lonely. Well, there you go.
Okay. Do you have a particular architect in mind you're thinking of? No. So I was also going to say that it's because, as you alluded to earlier, it's a difficult process, right? So you have this vision. Actually, a good description of what an architect does is they create a vision, and their job is to try and preserve and be a champion of that vision from beginning to very end. And it's like you have this, again, this vision forward, right? This clear, I don't know how to describe it, like this ship, right? That is going in that direction from the very beginning to the very end.
Right.
And as that ship is going through this journey, through 3 years of journeying throughout like all these different universes and things, a shitstorm of stuff is flying at this ship, and everything, it almost feels like everything is just trying to take away from the ship. There's like asteroids, there's birds, there's
vampires, ghosts.
There's all this stuff hitting it and just in the way constantly, right? And very little about the atmosphere and this and the places the ship is going. There's very little that's actually helping the ship forward. The only thing that's helping the ship forward is like the architects and maybe the handful of good consultants or other professionals you're working with, or the client if you're lucky. But a lot of times, I know architects feel like they're the only one with the thrusters trying to go forward, and everything else is trying to eat away at it. And when you experience that for 3 years for a project, and then again, and again, and again, and again, on every project for 25, 30 years, your entire professional life, the majority of your existence is trying to push forward these things, and everyone's just trying to eat away from it. That creates someone who's a pessimist.
But again, maybe you are pessimistic from the start, because if you are optimistic and you try to convince everybody to be optimistic as well on the projects, then maybe they would have turned out to be better.
Yeah.
That's why I'm kind of like, it's not like the world is guilty and you're not. Maybe you're partially guilty of the results and the pessimism that you're in.
I find that people who are pessimists tend also not to be great at changing the game that they're playing.
Like their own game?
Like what I mean... Like
the way they do things?
What?
Like the way they do things?
The way they do things and who they're working with.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Well, that's...
Because you just start to accept it. You don't really think about solving it. You're not trying to solve the problem.
No, and
you can't. I'm not saying you should try and fix people, but you can choose who you're working with, right?
No, it goes back to being honest with yourself. And I think at some point in people's pessimism, there is no turning back. Yep. Because that honesty and that kind of like checkpoint with yourself, like just stop happening. And you're just in that spiral that's just going down, and that's just going to keep going down.
I think it's easy for that to become your identity.
Yeah.
right? It becomes the way you see the world. It becomes the way you're taught.
Well, then you feel comfortable in your pessimism. So why would you change it?
Yeah, exactly. Right? Because what happens is that you end up putting yourself in a corner, and it's you versus everyone else. And even though it sucks, there's comfort because you're in the corner.
Right.
There's nothing else behind you. It's a corner.
There's no risk.
There's no risk.
You're already lost. So
exactly.
No risk.
Exactly. It's easy. To be honest, it's an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
And I think that's the other. Going back to the idea that being an optimist is kind of like going to the gym. It takes effort.
Well, and it goes back to optimism and activism and pessimism and just being passive.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I feel like when you're pessimist, you're probably going to be more passive than active on stuff because you already gave up.
Yeah.
One thing I was wondering is if being an optimist and being a visionary is somewhat the same thing. Like, can you be a visionary and not be optimistic? Because you were talking about like change and basically believing in change, like teachers are teaching things to kids for like the future, the next generation, or architects who are trying to like change the world, change cities, change how people live, right? Like it's like for the bigger vision, it's for the bigger future of things. And I think maybe in that sense, that's where I'm thinking maybe being optimistic could be dangerous if you're too optimistic because you can be too far from reality and too much toward your dream and the end goal and the future and less in the present. Mm-hmm. And I feel like there is also a lot of those types of architects out there who are maybe much more theory oriented or research oriented, and they just kind of like lose themselves or their practice or their work or their dialogue with their clients because they're too much in their heads, basically.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. You know, a moment ago we were talking about sort of that being a pessimist is an easy way out.
Right.
Right? Because you just kind of give it up. And you just can be, everything's shades of black to you. I think the flip side is true. Maybe that's what you're saying. Like you can just see everything as being hopeful and this and that, but if you're not actually engaging in reality and doing something about it, then it's a meaningless exercise. Yeah. I never thought about being an optimist as that way. I mean, at that point, I just, there needs to be actionable things that you do. You can't just be dreaming. I mean, is there a particular like architect or type of architect you're thinking about when you're describing that?
No, I mean, maybe I was thinking more of like the research architect, like experimental architecture, which I'm not saying their work is not valid. Like we do need people who do that kind of work, again, just to bring a different perspective and think about things differently than what everyone else is thinking.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I was thinking like Arco Senti, for example, right? This kind of like super interesting. What
do they call it? Experimental
urban lab, right? Yeah. Experimental way of living and building in community. And I mean, I think that's fascinating that people would actually like put those types of philosophy into the real world and really, really try to like make them real and implement them and really change how people live and believe in how society functions and all of those things, because it's like a tremendous exercise to even try to accomplish in real life, right?
Mm-hmm. And then actually have people build it.
And actually have people build it. Like, talk about optimism. Like, this guy was a visionary, was probably optimistic, managed to convince people to follow what he was believing in and thinking of, right? Mm-hmm. If it turned out successful, if it actually expanded to be beyond that one structure, I don't know. There's different ways to categorize success. But also maybe because he only thought about things that one way, then maybe he missed out on other possibilities of things, like,
Yeah, it's interesting. So I don't know. I think this does relate to the topics of optimism and pessimism, but I think mostly the distinction I'm visualizing is between, let's say, quote, the practicing architects versus the more academic architects who do experimental work. And I do think there's a comfort to doing experimental work. It's a fact.
Oh, yeah.
It's a fact, right?
Yeah. And Soleri actually was kind of like trying to bridge both.
Yeah, he was.
Which, it's just fascinating. But
and so I think it's very easy to...
Like the paper architects, you know, the ones who just do like working like the virtual space and installation and approach architecture more from like a research and maybe art form than it is actually like buildings and societies.
But you bring up a good point, though, of when that kind of work as a whole becomes too far stretched out into the visionary, imaginative stratosphere,
right,
and is too detached from, let's call it reality, then it starts to lose its impact. It starts to lose its relevance. And it also, I think, the headspace of those people becomes more like, you're just wishful thinking.
World. Yeah.
Like, I don't know what you're thinking. Yeah, fine. Sounds great. Dandelions and rainbows and unicorns. Sure. Why not? I tend to be more interested in the folks who are bridging that gap, or they're straddling that fence, and they're kind of going between those two sides or trying to. I think that's really...
Yeah, that's so complicated.
Extremely, and it's an interesting thing, too, that reality as a term, or the real world as a phrase, are always associated with what? With stress, pessimism. It's not possible. You're going to find out it's not possible.
Regulations,
money. All of these restrictions and limits comes with that, which is kind of a depressing thing when you think about it. Like, why is it that the real world and reality is immediately equated to, you can't do that? It's a negative. Not going to happen. I would become president. Yeah, wait until you get to the real world. Not going to happen, right? I want to design libraries and towers. It's going to be really difficult once you get into the... it's always that thing. And I think that, I don't know, maybe it's even more reason for all of us to not let that be the narrative, because we dictate the narrative.
Okay, so now let's get to the juicy part of this episode. Do you think you are a pessimistic person or an optimistic person? And now a quick break to thank the sponsors who support the Second Studio.
The Second Studio podcast is made possible by support from Autodesk. Autodesk has been part of the design conversation since 1982, providing the tools that help architects around the globe imagine and create beautifully designed, memorable buildings that people love and admire. Autodesk supports the work of the Second Studio, bringing the architecture community together, sparking curiosity, and leading vibrant interviews with the industry's visionaries and thought leaders. The Second Studio works hard to carry the architecture conversation forward, and Autodesk is proud to contribute to this podcast. Learn more about Autodesk by clicking the link in our show notes.
Spreadsheets can't bring your designs to life, but Programma can. Say hello to a bespoke integrated software suite built by and for experienced architecture and design professionals. Use your Pinterest image library to build collaborative mood boards, then turn them into shared online presentations with a click using Programma's pinboards. Use the Programma Web Clipper to build a centralized specification library for your studio. Share always up-to-date specifications and product schedules with clients, trades, and colleagues by generating beautiful, branded, live links and client dashboards. Programma's clean, minimal interface allows your work to shine. Start for free and save 25% on annual plans at programma.design/secondstudio.
You know, it's a good question because I'm the one who came up with this topic of like architects as optimists.
Oh, so therefore you're optimistic.
No. And again, an optimist is a person who believes that of the ways that something can go, it's going to go the better way. Right? That's what an optimist is.
Now, do you think you can be optimistic on certain things and pessimistic on certain things, like as a constant? Like, you're very optimistic about your health, your work, but you're super pessimistic about your love life and, I don't know, your neighborhood.
Yeah, of course. Of course. But I think when it comes to architecture and the fascinating thing with architecture, it is because it's an expression of culture and it's art and it's science and all these things, that fundamentally it's political and it's environmental, obviously. So automatically the root belief system of any architect should be, unless they've not really thought about it, in which case I question their capacity as an architect, should be, what is your political stance and what is your stance on the environment? And do you think these things can change? Do you think society can change? It really is that base level, like the core of what it means to be human. If you don't have a belief system about those things, I don't know how you can frame your architecture conceptually, right? It has to be. To create something physical that's put out into the world that other people interact with, it's a political statement.
Yeah.
It's a statement about the environment. It's a statement about everything. Our time now, about the past, and about the future, and what it's going to become. It is that. You cannot avoid it. And what's crazy is that so much of our conversation in the show has been kind of on the ground, boots level, working with clients and consultants and contractors and stuff. But below all of that, preceding all of that, is what I just said. I think you need to have a position about those 2 or 3 things I mentioned in order to have a position about architecture, in order to decide whether or not you're an optimist or pessimist. I would also say separately that it is possible to be one thing, but to pretend to be another, to be one thing and to act as another, right? I cannot say with sincerity that I'm an optimist. If we think about all the things I just mentioned, okay? Which is like a depressing thought. No one wants to work with someone who feels that way. But I'm not saying I am a pessimist, but I cannot say I'm not a pessimist either. However...
Well, again, there is being a pessimist or optimistic for your life and then for architecture.
I don't see them as being separate. I think they're tied together. They are tied together, right? You can pretend that they're not tied together, but they are. I just think that's a fact.
So you just admitted you're a pessimist?
When we think about the words pessimist and optimist, we visualize a person, maybe someone we know or someone we interacted with, and we say, okay, that person, like the pancake person I mentioned from school, optimist. The person I mentioned who everything's negative, everyone else's fault, clients are fucking them, like everything's bad, pessimist, right? And we can easily take that, as I described, and say, okay, therefore, when they're practicing architecture, they view their architecture as being this way or that way. But I think there's another kind of route, which maybe is how I feel. I don't perceive any of the work I do, whether it be the architecture, the designing, the business, or teaching, as coming from a place of that I'm an optimist or a pessimist. I do the work because I believe the work should be done to hopefully have this outcome, and I love the work.
So you're a hopeful pessimist.
In a way, yeah. Because for me, it doesn't really, whether or not, let's say we do a building, whether or not that building actually has impact on people, I don't have control over that. And frankly, in a certain sense, when it comes to the mentality of producing and doing work, I don't care. That's not my focus. My focus is on what I can do and what I want it to achieve. That's it, right? When I'm teaching, I'm focusing on helping the students, and I want them to believe, I want them to get to a certain level. I want them to go off and have a positive impact. Will they? I don't know, and I kind of don't care.
But you're optimistic then.
It's different. And I do want to say, it's not that I don't care because I don't give a shit. I mean, what I mean is I don't care because that's not within my frame of view. That's not my focus. My focus is just the work. That's it. Like I don't. What I'm saying is like there's another.
The work would, or like whatever effort you put in, would turn out into something good.
Yeah, you hope for it.
Yeah. Well, you can only hope for it. Like you can't control those things.
But it's not even hope. I mean, it's kind of like, how do I put it?
Like you're doing something in the goal of that being good for something later on. So you are starting from an optimistic place. You might not be a joyful person, but but you're optimistic in your doing of contribution and the work you put in.
I don't know if that can. Okay, let me phrase it this way too.
You're an introverted optimist.
I think people can do work because they hope it has an effect, and that's their goal, is to have this effect. So they're doing the work, planning for that to happen.
Right.
That's one type of mindset, one person. You can also be a person, though, who just likes the work, and you're absorbed by it and consumed by the work. And the work is planned to have an effective outcome, but that's not why you do it.
But there's different goals, right? And like if your goal is for the building to turn out as like a good building, a good design to your standard, then you're optimistic toward that. If someone else works on another building, their goal is for it to change the neighborhood where the building takes place. Well, that's their own personal goal, maybe, or like ultimate goal. Well, they're going to be optimistic toward that. Doesn't mean you have to be optimistic about everything on the project, right? Like, I think that's where like each of our personalities and interests and sensibilities and personal goals in many ways comes in, and I don't think you can be optimistic on everything.
Well, I suppose we need to speak with some kind of psychologist about what these terms mean. But that's what I'm saying, though. I think it's very easy when we think of these terms to think about, okay, you're an optimist, therefore you have this future state where there's blue skies, and this blue sky scenario is what's going to happen with your building. I don't think about that outcome so much. I just think about the thing itself, even though I know it's intended to have that impact. If I'm designing a library, I know in its design it has spaces and whatever things to have a positive impact to allow people to engage, like whatever, right? But I don't think about that other stuff. Like, in other words, what I'm saying too is I think there's some people we meet where there's no choice. There's no thinking about, is it good, is it bad, what's going to happen? There's no choice. You just do it because you're drawn toward it. And it's instinctual. It's in your nature. You cannot help it, right? And I find that also when people find their passion, there's no choice when they find their passion. There's not like, oh, well, I decided to pursue, I don't know, guitar because I wanted this thing. No, you found it, and that's it. There's a drive to it. There's no reasoning behind it.
Well, maybe that's not related to optimism or pessimism. It's just like something else.
Possibly, but okay. So back to you're saying researchers, and when you said researchers, I think of like scientists and lab,
I think people have like white coats in labs, like playing with liquids and making
the perspective
notes
of an 8-year-old, science stuff. But they're mixing things.
Hey man, like important stuff right there in those tubes,
Yeah, I know. More tubes, the more important it is. But I think you can kind of imagine that people who are doing that kind of work, that there are folks who are doing it and their drive is the outcome, right? Yeah. They want to cure cancer or whatever. But there are also people where their drive is actually their first initial primary drive, that spark, is not necessarily that. It's just to do the work. They like solving the Rubik's Cube. They like solving the math and the science, and they want to get to the next thing and the next thing. And they know what the goal is. They know that the goal, that if it's achieved, will have this impact. But that's not. They don't do it thinking, I want to get to the finish line. That's what I'm doing to get to the finish line. That's not the purpose of it for them. The purpose is, I enjoy the thing. I enjoy the Rubik's Cube. I enjoy lifting weights. I enjoy doing the thing. I don't care about the goal.
But then you're talking about like, life goal and career goals and being competitive or career driven, which is, I think it's fine, but I think it's different from your mindset. And I think maybe optimism and pessimism comes more as like a reaction. Like, what would be your natural reaction to something that happens to you? Like if something bad happens to you, are you going to go like just keep going downhill, or are you going to look up and be optimistic that it's going to get better? Maybe that's how you define it, more than like what's important in the work that you do, because there's multiple nuances.
But see, the funny thing is, and I'd be very curious to know like how many architects resonate with what I'm saying. I don't view or ever feel that the decisions I'm making and the large decisions in terms of projects or the small ones as being one or the other. But like when stuff happens, like if you get an email that's not pleasant, or if like your project, like when your project is done, okay, right, and the thing you are interested in the project, the outcome of the project, are you going to look at the project and always say like, oh, it's not good enough, oh no, this was wrong, or are you going to look at it and be like, hey, we did it, we finished it, it's it's been photographed, people moved in, we managed, it's probably not my best work, but guess what, like I feel like it's the next stone up to the the next one. And that probably defines if you're optimistic or pessimistic. I see it both ways, and I have no interest in deciding if it's one way or the other. Like that's not. I don't know. I'm very curious to how other people feel about this. I just see the facts. The facts are, it's amazing that we did a project. There's many ways, many things you can say that are true as to why it would be a positive thing. At the same time, there's many criticisms I would have of anything that I would ever produce or anything in the world. It's both. That's what it is. And I guess the question is, what do I choose to do with that information? How do I let it affect me? learn from the mistakes, but the rest I don't let it affect me because I'm concerned with the next thing. I don't even on a smaller scale. Let's say we're doing a project and so there's some kind of hiccup. Let's say it's usually some consultant who's fucked up, who's like delayed or whatever. How do I respond? Am I going to be negative about it? Am I going to throw a fit about it? Am I going to be positive? I don't really see it as negatives and positives. I just see it as, okay, we got to move forward. What's the best way to move forward? Depending on all the factors at play, this is how I'm going to respond. And that's it. And I that's what I'm saying, though. I think that way of thinking about it has less to do with I'm not concerned with the outcome, which sounds crazy. I mean, I'm scratching my head about that. I'm just solving whatever's in front of me, right? And in the longer term of all of this, there is a direction because I know what I enjoy doing, and that's kind of it. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like I always find it weird when people are they have a job and like, I'm an optimist because I believe that we're going to do this, and I believe. I'm like, yeah, I guess you don't have any control over that, so why are you focusing so much? Just do the work.
Maybe you're just a realist.
Is that the third option?
I don't know. I'm trying to come up with a name tag for you so you can describe yourself to people and they get it, because this is like, going on, and I think many people are still like, so which camp is it in? I think you're just a realist.
Yeah. Well, maybe. I don't know.
Or you are a hopeful pessimist. I'm not sure.
No, I like that term. I like that term.
Actually, I think my mom probably is. I don't think she's a pessimist, because she had some like bad times in her life, so definitely she had to be optimistic. But she's very much of what she would call a fatalist.
A what? A fatalist? Like in terms of death? Like fatal?
Like it's kind of like it's meant to be.
Oh, okay.
She defaults to what was meant to be.
What does that mean?
Well, it was meant to happen, so
like
don't worry about it.
Like if someone delivers you nachos, but you ordered a burrito, is that what?
Yeah, it was meant to be, man.
I do not know how to respond to that.
Which I don't understand either, because then it's like, well, then everything good, everything's bad. Like what? Then you have no control over nothing, or you have control over everything. Like therefore, are you taking a position at all? Or you're just waiting for shit to come down on you?
Yeah, no, I don't. Okay. Well, I don't know if having met your mom, I don't know if she's actually like that. But I am thinking of people who are like that. I can't be around those people. Fuck off.
Oh, you're thinking about people who are like that?
Yeah.
Who?
Oh, no. I mean, just in general. Yeah. Kind of just go with the flow, whatever. I'm like, get the fuck out of here. Like, we're trying to do something. Because
I just feel like these people are just worms. They have no spine. They have no reaction to it.
It was like just a waste of space. Like, I don't know what you're doing here. I mean, it's meant to be just turn yourself into manure for like the trees or something. That'll be more useful than your existence. I don't buy into it, because I think anyone who's trying to do something, it requires effort. You can't just be like, it's going to be that way. And of course, not everybody's that way all the time, but there's some folks who are like that like 80% of the time. And I just... you disgust me.
Well, these people should not be leaders.
No, they can't be leaders. Of course not. I mean, as I get lucky. But I do want to talk about like the control or lack of control one has over their environment, right? Because earlier in the conversation, we were talking about being an optimist or pessimist as a way of thinking, a way of seeing the world, which is very much in your control.
Right.
But obviously the majority of the universe it's outside of you. But I think going back to the idea of the game, that's the mistake that I think a lot of older or even younger grumpy architects make, is that they don't realize that you can choose to change the game that you're playing, meaning you can choose the people you work with or don't work with. Like, you have that capacity. Yeah. You are not a victim. You are not a thing that is subjected to actions all the time, and you will just have to receive them. You can just step aside and then avoid that, or step in this other direction to find a positive environment to be in. And I think that's where, I don't know if it has to do with being an optimist or not, but I think that's the mistake a lot of architects make over a period of time. The number one complaint you will hear from architects are the clients, right? Every architect talks about bad clients, and every architect has had at least one, probably a handful of bad clients. But there are many architects where the majority of their clients
are good people.
They would, I was going to say, they would say are bad clients, right? Or at least those overshadow all the other ones that are good.
Well, that's the thing too, is that I feel like in general, in the world and life, the bad news travels more than the good ones. So
that's 100% true.
You're always going to hear more architects complain about their bad clients than architects saying like how many great clients they have. You're always going to hear architects complain about clients not paying. You're rarely going to hear architects saying like, all of my clients always pay on time.
Right.
Because nobody wants to hear that. You know?
Yeah, sure. There's a little bit of
it's less gossipy. It's less, hot topic, things we can complain. Humans, they love to complain. They love to like gather in like little groups of hyenas and just like, complain about stuff. And
but you know what's funny is that
it's weird.
It is very weird. There was a period of time for me where that was sort of like the feel for fun conversation. Now I have no interest in it. I just don't care because it's not productive.
No, it's not productive.
I don't have time to not be productive. That's the
thing. No, it makes you age faster. Like it makes you worry. It impacts your health. Like it's not.
Having said that, I do plenty of complaining on the show, so maybe this is my space to vent.
No, we do, but I think it would be interesting to. And I think also like those types of conversation and complaints has hurt our profession. Because rather than actually talking about like, well, maybe what did we do wrong here to get to that point, and how can we all change to make that a collective change to actually help us in the profession? No, let's just talk about the bad stuff, reminisce about the bad stuff, and just like keep recycling that bad stuff over and over, but not ever proposing a solution to it.
Yeah.
And that's where it just becomes toxic. It's toxic pessimism.
Yeah, that's the distinction, right? Because I think discussing openly
issues is important.
In even a humorous way, often, these terrible situations you end up in, or these things that happen in a project, like, oh my God, the steel showed up and it was all the wrong size. There's some humor in that, but there's that threshold you mentioned is if the people who are involved in the conversation are talking about this, but they're also actively doing something to fix it, it's fine. But if they aren't, and the next conversation also has some kind of negative story, and they still aren't doing anything to fix that problem, and it repeats, then I have no interest. Then that's a person who's just, it's going to be a bad time for them for the next however many years unless they change their way. So I don't need to interact with them.
Yeah, and nobody wants to be around those people.
No.
Like if everything is just bad all the time, then nobody wants to be around you.
That is the
Or you're just going to keep attracting people like you.
Yep, 100%.
And it's just all going to go down the same rabbit hole.
Yep. That's the weird thing, right? Call it energy, call it mannerisms, call it whatever. Like, if you have 1,000 people, you put them all in kind of one space and they all kind of bounce around with each other, they will naturally find their own people to be around. They will cluster into groups of 6 or 12 or whatever. They will find their people over time, consciously or subconsciously. It will happen. So if you are a certain type of person in the negative sense, you will be around those people that are either like-minded or continue to have a negative impact on you because you allow it to happen.
Well, in that, therefore, you will attract the bad clients.
Yeah.
The pessimist clients, the negative ones, and it might not work out. So, I think it's important to talk about the issues that you have with other people, but also put things in perspective and try and change the things that you can change.
Well, this is one of the most frustrating things with architects in general is they do a lot of complaining. But a lot of them are like, okay, well, you've been practicing for how long? How about you just stop working with those clients?
Yeah.
And there are definitely
times... How about
times...
you change your filtering system when, leads and clients approach you rather than say yes to everybody? Maybe... have a selection that just helps you get to the type of client that you want to get toward and away from the ones you don't want.
And there's always instances where you have to take on a client because it's just finances. Yeah. That's what it is. It's money, right? And I get that. But again, short-term versus long-term, you take on one client now because you need to, there's red flags, You're like, okay, I took this on. I knew the risk, but I needed the money to pay my people. So that's what it was, right? But you don't allow that to become a pattern of behavior.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And I think it's very easy, especially when I think our projects take so long and they overlap, they always do, to let that actually become like your way of existing. And, it's like you just can't do that. And I do find in general that the younger generation is maybe more on top. These topics are more at the front of their minds. And maybe it actually goes back to the fact that anyone under 45 is just more optimistic or more naive, but for whatever the reason, they tend to be, more forward thinking about it rather than...
Well, things are also more complex and more expensive and more constrained and more everything. So, I mean, like if you are like our generation, you kind of have to be optimistic because otherwise, like, how are you ever going to make it to the end? Like... You can go to the war thinking you already lost. Like, what's the point then?
Yeah.
I think like if you want to live a life that feel fulfilling and exciting and, drives you forward, you kind of have to like, at least just hope something's going to work out here. Otherwise, why even bother?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think you should also, if you have a bad client, you took on like one of those red flag clients, for example, and things are not going super well, I think it's important to make sure that you don't start thinking that all of your other clients are going to do that. Or like all the future clients are also going to be doing the same things. You could just have found one bad apple. It doesn't mean all the apples are bad.
Yeah.
Because then you turn into a pessimist.
True. And I think that also obviously applies to everyone else that you're working with if we're talking about teamwork, like consultants, engineers, contractors, sales representatives, et cetera, et cetera. I think the way that I've never really thought about it, but the way that I approach it or would approach it is that you assume that the people are going to do what you perceive as being the right thing. So an easy example is that if someone owes you a drawing and it should take them a week and you've said in the meeting, okay, you will have this to us in 1 week, you assume they're going to give it to you in 1 week, right?
Right.
And if they don't, then that means something. Or when it comes to clients paying their architects, you assume if I give you an invoice and it says it's due on this date, that you're going to pay on that date. And in a sense, what I'm saying is that you give folks the benefit of the doubt. So you're setting, in terms of the optimist, pessimist view, you're assuming that it's going to work out. You're setting the bar and the reality at that level. It's going to work out. If it doesn't work out, then you change how you operate, or that just simply means that you can now categorize that person one notch to the left, right?
Right.
And if the next time they get it, then that means something. And then you keep track, right? I think, though, you have to give people the opportunity. You kind of have to assume that they're going to do the right thing so that they can therefore have the potential to do the right thing. And if they do, then in the end, you know that there's someone you want to be around. And when they have you meet other people, there's a greater chance that those people are going to be like that too, right? If you don't give people that opportunity, then everything, as you said, will be viewed from a pessimist's perspective, and everything will not work out because you've never given it the opportunity to work out.
Right.
I'm just thinking of the easy example of like, let's say retainers. Now we're talking about fees, right? Right. So many architects like, oh, I did all this work I didn't get paid. What do you mean you didn't get paid? Well, I did a bunch of work and they didn't pay me. Did you get a retainer? No. Can never ask for a retainer. No one ever pays a retainer. Well, that's not true. All of our clients pay us retainers. So it's 100% possible, right? It's because whatever reasons the clients you have aren't paying you retainers. But also, by the way, you asked one client for a retainer and they said no, and you wanted that project. It didn't work out. The next 6 clients, did you ask for a retainer or did you stop because you assumed they weren't going to, right? That's a very good example of what you're saying.
Yeah.
And that's exactly, you need to give people the opportunity and call it the benefit of the doubt that they're going to do something that, yes, it's to your benefit in that case, but broadly speaking, is a better version of reality, whether it be retainers or deadlines or, I don't know, whatever else, how you treat people, whether it's polite, whether they're on time to meetings, all this kind of stuff, right? If you don't give them that opportunity, you never know if it actually exists out there.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing, right? That's why so many architects end up in a place after decades of practicing where they're just bitter.
Bitter. Yeah.
There's a lot of bitter architects. So I think the other part of this conversation, which you touched on,
you gotta find the sweet ones,
is like this contradiction between architects claiming that they're optimists. Because I do architecture, I'm an optimist. Yeah, I know you, but you're not an optimist. What are you talking about?
I agree.
Do you think that to be an architect, you have to be an optimist?
Well, I think you have to believe that your work has some sort of meaning.
Sure.
You know, to call that optimistic or not, I don't know. And you also have to be hopeful that your work is going to actually happen.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the buildings that you've designed are actually going to get built, and things are going to change, and you're going to be doing more. And then, I think you do have to be optimist for a better world. Otherwise, you're going to be building shitty architecture, you know. And there's probably a lot of pessimist architects out there. There's so many like terrible buildings because I think it goes back to like even bigger topics, like they don't care. They're not in for the right motivation, you know, they don't really believe in what they do. They maybe don't even believe in anything, you know, so.
I don't know many architects who perceive their work and life that way. It's too hard a profession to not care about what you do.
I don't know, if you just turn out drawings and do drafting and permits and get a bunch of like shitty houses built, true. Then...
well, then
you don't care about the bigger picture or the future.
Well, you've given up.
Yeah, you've given up. So, and if you listen to this, you should think about it. What are you doing?
Yeah. Well, I think that the majority of the architecture that's built is poor, but not because of architects. It's mostly because they're not even designed by architects.
But that might be also the architect's fault.
Oh, how is it their fault? They weren't even involved.
Well, maybe they should try to get involved on different types of projects. Maybe they should explain to people that they can afford architects, even their projects are small, just to educate people. There's always things you could, and maybe that's why I'm an optimist, there's always things you can do to turn things in a more positive way. Mm-hmm. It's just a matter of what are you doing.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
They're bad architecture, then just print a bunch of stickers and posters and tag buildings that are bad architecture. Let the world know they're bad architecture.
Right.
You know?
Right. Do something.
Like gas stations, why they all look like shit, like shitty, like, you know, signage and stuff. Go put posters on them and say this is shitty building. Turn it into something more interesting. Okay. Like, I don't know. I might start doing that. I might start printing like stickers of like, this is a bad building, bad architecture, like bad and good architecture. I'm just going to go around California and just...
Can we make some stickers and put it on our website and sell them in packs of like 20? Good architecture, bad architecture.
We should do that.
Yep.
Oh, I'm down.
Guerrilla style?
I'm down. Yeah, guerrilla style.
All right.
Yeah.
What do you have planned for the rest of the Sunday? Can you crank that out?
I was going to work on a project. Do some window details.
I think we should do that.
I think we should do that. You know, I mean, and it's more of like maybe more of an artist, you know, statement of like labeling stuff, kind of like with humor, but also satire and also like honesty. Like, why not? Like, why if you get an ugly building, an ugly building sticker on your building, then hey, man, like, maybe it's gonna make you think.
So we're gonna have some stickers that are like, you know, 3x3 circles, and we'll have some that are like a foot. Okay.
For the really bad ones.
And yeah. At least a foot. I mean, I'm thinking like 2 feet would be great, but I think that would be very expensive.
It's like when there is a dangerous cabinet, a closet in a building because there is like dangerous mechanical equipment or toxic chemicals or whatever, you get like a big warning sign. I think you need a big warning sign when there is a terrible building. Yeah. So everybody could be aware of it.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, I think we should do that. Great idea.
Okay, cool. That solves. Okay, so I'm not quite sure how that ties into this conversation.
Well, I'm optimistic that by doing that, there will be less ugly buildings and better architecture.
Right. I mean, I think
that's my action toward that.
That's the thing, too, is that maybe it's just I'm more interested in actions. Like, do something.
Well, I'm very excited about our stickers coming out.
Yeah.
I would love to drive around California and see one of them and be like, oh my God, we made it happen.
Oh, we're going to do it. We're going to sell them for at cost, super cheap. So we're not going to make any money off of it.
Yep.
But we'll just start. Imagine if every architect listening to this show, or every architect like in the country of the United States, put 10 stickers out there. Let's say 5 good and 5 bad, right?
Yeah.
How many stickers would that be? Hundreds of thousands, probably. It would be in the news.
I mean, I don't want to hurt people's feelings, you know, like if their house gets tagged like bad architecture, but also they probably need to know.
Okay, so
you know,
okay, let me be clear.
If you have a baby and it's ugly, I think someone should tell them, you know, FYI, your baby is ugly.
Did you just put a sticker on my baby's forehead that says bad architecture? Yeah, well.
Bad design.
There are some rules with this game.
Yeah, no, I know.
One, if someone's living in their house and they're clearly in a poor neighborhood, do not label their house bad architecture.
Okay. It's not, yeah.
Okay. We're talking about, so if I were labeling bad architecture, it would be any public building that's bad gets a sticker. Houses listed for sale, if it's bad, it's getting a sticker.
Yeah.
Houses that are owned by wealthy people, if they're bad, gets a bad sticker.
Yeah, you get money, you got to do good architecture. Yep. There's no excuse there.
Yep. And the good art, I have a feeling that we'll need to probably order and print more of the bads than the goods. Just
but
we can be optimists and print more of the goods than the bads.
Yeah, and so if you get the stickers, what you should do is take a photo after you stick the sticker on the building and I don't know, just make it an Instagram story or text it to us. Because I'm also curious to see like good architecture and what, you know, people out there or architects think is good architecture.
Yeah. Would you feel comfortable sticking a sticker on good architecture though?
I probably would never stick a sticker on good architecture. But I'm an optimistic, you know, so.
Okay. I just feel bad putting a sticker on something that's good. Maybe it would be more like holding the sticker up in front of the building.
Oh, no, I would have to make a sign to put in front of it to put the sticker on.
We can't sell signs. That's too many signs. It would be too expensive. Think of the shipping.
Well, you put the sticker, you know, like put it like against the window, but you don't actually pin it off.
Okay.
You know, you just put it there.
Or you put the sticker on the window, which you can take it off of the window.
Okay.
But no stickers. I don't want any stickers. I don't want to see any stickers on poured-in-place concrete. I don't want to see stickers on
if it's a bad building,
wood siding. No. The good stickers. We have to be selective as where we place the good stickers.
You have to be careful where you stick it. Yeah.
Out of respect to the good architecture.
Yeah.
The bad architecture, front
Anywhere,
door.
Yeah. Front cover.
Yeah. And I want you to stick it on and bring a hairdryer and really cake that thing on there. Really, really bake it in there. So they have to like demo the house to get the sticker on.
All right. Well, I guess we got a lot of work to do then.
All right. Check the website, secondstudiopod.com/stickers. Or I think we have a shop with some sweaters and stuff on there. But now there's going to be stickers. So buy some stickers.
Buy some stickers. If you do like the show and those types of wild conversation, please follow us everywhere you can. We're on Spotify, YouTube, all of the podcast platforms, iTunes. We're also on social media, mostly really Instagram. You can shoot us a message there. We also have the hotline 213-222-6950 where you can send a text message or call and leave a voicemail. If you have anything you want to share, everything you want to ask, we're there. You know where to find us. And of course, please leave us reviews. We love reviews.
Yep, that's about it, right? Good.
All right. Yeah, stay tuned for the next one.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.